Hello there everyone, I hope you're all doing well. Today I want to share with you my famous apple pie. This is a recipe that I have worked on for many years, and I've shared it with you a few times here and there. I've made some tweaks, and I really just want to share with you one recipe that is concise, simple, easy to follow, and the version that I do now. I absolutely adore my apple pie, and I know a lot of you have tried it and enjoyed it as well, and that means so much to me, so I'm excited to share this recipe once and for all. Now, this apple pie does take 2 days ideally to make. You can do it in one in a pinch, but it is much better if you give it the full 2 days. And I will have many recommendations throughout of how to make it absolutely perfect, so be sure to listen all the way through. Now, before we dive too deep into this though, I do want to talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. As you can probably tell by this video, I absolutely love to bake. And I've spent a lot of my life learning how to bake and delving deep into different areas of baking, but I have never felt confident enough to make my own sourdough starter. It's something I've been meaning to learn about for such a long time, but I just have never known where to begin, and it has felt very intimidating for me. But with classes on Skillshare, it has become something that feels easy and achievable. Skillshare is the largest learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, freelance, productivity, and more. Skillshare can help you take your work, hobbies, and passions to the next level. Beyond just classes, Skillshare also offers learning paths, which are curated sequential class collections that allow you to master a specific skill in one go. I've been exploring their classes on film and video, creative careers, as well as crafts and DIY. Each of these categories offers so many classes that I've been enjoying, and even more that I can't wait to explore after I finish going through my current class on sourdough starters. The sourdough starter class takes you through the complete process of making a sourdough starter, the care it needs, and even how to use the discard to make a multitude of recipes. Skillshare has also recently made some exciting improvements. They've created a new and improved class system that includes smarter class categories, 3 new class topics: creative careers, creative inspiration, and AI innovation. I have very much been enjoying the creative careers. And they also introduced the ability to find classes by software and material. As a new member, you are asked to share about your interests, and from there, Skillshare immediately shows recommendations tailored to your goals. To me, fall is a season for learning. As the days are getting colder and the nights are getting darker, it's just the perfect time to cozy up and learn about something new to keep me busy as this season continues on. And this season, I really want to hone in on more sides of baking that I haven't yet explored, hence the sourdough starter. So if this sounds interesting to you, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Get started today. Thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring, and let's dive into this apple pie. So as we covered, this is a 2-day apple pie. That may seem a little crazy, but believe me, it is so worth it. The apple pie itself is broken down into 3 different parts: the filling, the crust, and the crumble topping. Of course, if you want to do a double crust, you're very welcome to do that, but my goodness, I think the crumble topping is an essential part of this pie. The filling is the part of the pie that takes 2 days. You're welcome to prep the crust and the crumble on day 1 if you would prefer. This really just depends on the time that you have. Most of the time nowadays, I prefer to make the crust and the crumble on the 2nd day, but honestly, there's really no reason to do one or the other on either day. So let's first talk about the ingredients that you will need, starting with the filling. For the filling, you'll need 8 to 10 green apples, 1 cup of brown sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, half a teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/3 cup of lemon juice, half a cup of maple syrup, 3.5 tablespoons of cornstarch, 2 tablespoons of water, and 3.5 tablespoons of butter. For the crust, you will need 2 cups of flour, 1 teaspoon of salt, 10 tablespoons of butter, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 2 egg yolks, and 4 tablespoons of cold water. And finally, for the crumble topping, you'll need half a cup of flour, half a cup of sugar, half a cup of brown sugar, half a cup of oats, 3/4 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, and 6 tablespoons of butter. All right, once you've gathered all of your ingredients, it is time to begin the pie. And as I said, day 1 begins with the filling. Now, day 1 filling does not include all of the ingredients that go into the filling, so make sure that you don't just go ahead and add all the ingredients. You'll want to save a good handful of them for day 2. Begin by chopping up your apples. I like my slices to be pretty thin and kind of small just so that they bake well, but feel free to layer them in whatever way feels right to you. Then go ahead, add that 1 cup of brown sugar, all of your spices and salt, and then that lemon juice. Once you've got everything in your bowl, make sure to combine it really, really well. It's important that all the apples are fully saturated in this mixture. Then cover it and set it aside. You can keep it in a fridge or on a counter. Lately I've been keeping it in the fridge just to keep it away from my dogs, but either place is okay. The reason this is a 2-day apple pie is because we want the apples to release as much of the juice as we possibly can. This mixture will draw out the moisture from the apple slices and it will collect at the bottom of that bowl, creating this really delicious cinnamony, nutmeg, lemony apple juice that is just, to die for. Now, if you can't possibly do this in 2 days, start these really early in the morning and let them macerate or lose their juices throughout the day as long as you possibly can. But ideally, again, this is an overnight activity. Now for me, this is day 2. So while we're waiting for the apples to let go of all of their juice, you can start prepping the crust and the crumble topping. I super recommend that you make your own crust. It really is so simple to do and just elevates a pie so much. And this crust in particular, I am pretty proud of. To make it, begin by combining your flour, salt, sugar, and butter. The butter should be cubed into these little tiny cubes, and then just use your fingers to pinch it together into the rest of the mixture. You want the butter to stay pretty cold, and it doesn't have to come together very perfectly yet. It's good to have kind of these chunks of butter throughout. It'll make a really nice flaky crust. Once you've got it loosely mixed all together, kind of pinched together, take your 2 egg yolks and the 4 tablespoons of really cold water and mix those 2 together really well. Then slowly add this mixture into that butter flour mixture and pinch it together until you have a dough. You may need to use all of the egg yolk and water, or you may not. It kind of depends on the atmosphere of where you are. This time around, I ended up using all of it. Bring it all together until you have a nice dough. At this point, I kind of like to flatten it into a disc, then wrap it up and pop it in the fridge. You want to keep the dough as cold as you can. Keeping the butter really cold just helps to create this really beautiful flaky crust. Making the crust is so simple and so quick, and it just tastes amazing. If you are going to make a pie that has 2 layers to it, a bottom crust and an upper crust, I would recommend making 2 of these crust recipes. And if you don't want to work the crust together by hand, you can also put it in a food processor if that's something that you own. I do not own a food processor, but I have heard from a lot of people who have made the pies that they've done that in the past and it's worked really well for them. So that's a much quicker way to get it to come together. Now, once your crust is popped in the fridge and all prepared, it's time to make that crumble topping. This is pretty much the same as the crust. Toss all of your ingredients into a bowl. That's the flour, oats, sugar, brown sugar, cinnamon and nutmeg, and those 6 tablespoons of butter. Again, I like the butter to be cubed, and then we're just gonna pinch this all together. You want it to be kind of crumbly. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's just gonna be this literal crumble coating that we put on top. So get it as mixed together as you can, but don't sweat it. It doesn't have to look beautiful. It will look beautiful once it's baked. So once that's prepped, cover it again and pop that back in the fridge because again, we do still want that butter to stay really nice and cold. And now at this point, it's time to finish up those apples. So pull out that bowl that you prepped them in and grab a pot along with a colander. I did only have a soup pot available at this very moment. Usually I would not cook them down in such a large vessel, but all of my other ones were occupied with other cooking projects at the moment. You really don't need that big of a pot, just a small simmer pot will do. But take that pot, add that colander, and pour all of your apples into it. Let them sit there and drip for a little bit to let all of those juices flow into the pot. Then transfer your apples back into that bowl that they were originally in. And put the colander away. Into the cook pot, add in your maple syrup, and then make a slurry with the cornstarch and water. To do this, you just want to mix the cornstarch and water together in a separate bowl. This will prevent the cornstarch from being clumpy throughout the rest of the recipe. Once it's all combined though, pour that slurry into the cook pot with your apple juice and all of the goodness that's in there. Transfer this to the stove and have your butter next to you, but don't add it yet. Turn the stove onto a medium heat and begin to stir. Here we are going to be making a beautiful apple jelly. It is so delicious and will sit really nicely between all of the apples in the pie. Pay attention, it will happen pretty quickly. So sit here and just continually stir and keep your eye on it because all of a sudden that cornstarch will act and it will thicken up really, really quickly. It's usually right around where it starts to boil. So once it starts to thicken up, turn off that heat and toss in that butter. And then mix that all together. It will look so beautiful. Then add this back on top of your apples and mix it all in there. Now at this point, I have a confession to make. I was making a 2-day apple pie in this video and it turned out that I did not have all of the tools I needed. I just realized that both of my pie plates are at my partner's house, so this will be a 3-day pie instead of a 2-day pie. So I popped my apples back in the fridge, waited one more day. This is not ideal, I do not recommend because the apples will continue to be releasing some more liquid and then it's just not as perfect, but that's okay. These things happen, it doesn't have to be the most masterful thing. But that next day, which this should be the second day, roll out the crust really, really, really thin. Do this on a floured surface. It can take some time to kind of smush it out if the butter's really cold. But get it as thin as you possibly can, and then add that onto your pie dish. Take time here to carefully mold it into place, repair any cracks, and just make it look nice. Then trim off the excess. Keep that excess though and roll it back out, and if you wish, make some decorative designs with it. At this point, it's time to preheat your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Then add your apples to your pie dish in that crust. It's okay if they're spilling over a little bit, that does tend to happen sometimes. Kind of depends on the size of the apples you used, but get them in there as well as you can. Then grab that crumble topping, sprinkle it over, make it look beautiful. Then if you wish to, add some decorative parts of the crust back to it. At this point, I like to give the crust a little bit of an egg wash and sprinkle it with sugar to make it extra delicious and beautiful. And then it's time to bake. Cover it with tin foil to protect that outer crust from burning and pop it in the oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for 35 minutes, covered. Then take the tin foil off and bake it for another 10 to 15 minutes. You might need to bake it a little bit more depending on the thickness of your apple slices, but it should be pretty good at this point. Take it out, allow it to cool, and enjoy. It is a showstopper, it is delicious, I am so proud of it, and I really hope you guys enjoy. I did try to get a slice picture of it, but that didn't quite go as planned. And that is about as successful as I can get at getting a slice of pie. It is delicious, and I think it still looks good, but it is not as picturesque as I think it could be. But since I always get a request to show you guys what it looks like inside, here is my attempt. Delicious, but a little bit fallen apart. Enjoy. I'm not quite the best at scooping pie, I gotta say, but it is very tasty nonetheless. I bring this pie to all fall and early winter gatherings. It is a big part of celebrations for me and something that's very special to me. I do in the wintertime like to add a little bit of clove to the spices that I use, usually just 1/4 of a teaspoon, and it makes it a little bit more of a wintry pie. But feel free to experiment, and I really would be curious to know what you do. And with that, thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you can and would like to, I'd really appreciate it if you checked out my Patreon. There I share art, herbal profiles, book recommendations, and monthly workshops. It's a ton of fun and really what keeps things running over here. So if you want to help support this channel, that's the best way to do it. I also have another channel where I share more day-to-day life, magic, herbalism, all of those good things. And I have a book. It is all about spellcraft, and it will take the beginner to the intermediate. So if any of these are interesting to you, all of it will be linked in the description down below. I hope you're having a lovely day, good luck baking, and I can't wait to see you again soon.